that you've gone through the whole process once, and then you can go back and assess each part. But I'm wondering if I liked how you did that whole paragraph, and you all did it. So then maybe you have the master of, there's 8 capitals, there's this, and they have to find them all and then assess them based on that and say, well, you didn't find them, like really concretely set it out. I don't know.
So do it from 2 phases, if I'm understanding what you're saying. So I would give them a sample paragraph with this criteria, and then they would be assessed on their proofreading skills.
Yeah, like
and then we would go do their own, so then that way they are learning just this skill set as one skill set, and the second skill set will be their own writing skill set.
Yeah, maybe, just give them an accountability of, you have to actually look at it, and I'm assessing you on the fact that you did actually, I don't know, that's the part of assessment
Does anyone...
What do you do if somebody doesn't know what alliteration words are, or they don't know what nouns are or adjectives, and they're supposed to assess something they don't know, even though you did go over that stuff, right?
Yeah.
I agree.
And that's why I think we're back to that skill set of maybe being more purposeful in who you're aligning people with. So it might end up becoming, and I'm thinking, Paul, I hate saying it, but if you had your advanced group and the stronger skill set of writers, they could be more independently doing because they understand it.
Right.
But then maybe our other kids, right, then we have to almost do it as a modeling within a table together and reteaching that, like continuously teaching the noun, the verbs, the adjective, adverbs, all those pieces.
When you scaffold these little items, so for instance like commas and capitalizing I's and things like that, does the scaffolding process begin with with the story and the paragraphs and then lead into this assignment, or are there like individual assignments for each of those?
Their daily work. So every day, our students, we call them daily 5. I call them daily 5. Melanie, you call them?
Daily doozy.
Yeah, daily doozies. So what happens is consistently every day there's some form of language arts assignment that we do. So underline the cause and effect for a story. Correct these sentences. What's a possessive noun? So we're constantly, every day, we have 5 language arts questions. Identify the adverb in the sentence. So we do those continuously, but we also, from that, we do mini lessons too. So that kind of leads us into each of these things.
Because I think with things, for instance, commas, if I'm thinking of how I would want to teach commas eventually, maybe like starting with something such as how commas save life. So it's time to eat, Grandpa, and then where does that comma go to save life? To me, as if I was a student, it's funny, right? And that's intriguing, and maybe that would then now encourage me like, well, then we have to make sentences that if there's no comma, either something happens that we didn't mean to happen, and then how do we fix that with a comma? Absolutely. Might be interesting.
And I guess sometimes we always take things for granted too, meaning, we're in grade 4 and we're still, number one thing, capital letters start every sentence. Like, I have kids who don't even capitalize their own names. Like, things like that. Like,
Grade 5. Pronoun I, small
the I drives me crazy.
Now, does Google, I know Google Docs, you can have it read back to you. Does it notice, aside from just not having a period, that it just does have non-sentence, but would it say if instead of I, if it wasn't capitalized? Like, is there some other way around this?
I'm pretty sure Google just auto-corrects it. And then you don't
Not
even
always.
see the issue. Not always, no.
Can I
No,
ask? I didn't know
think-
that. So they can listen back to what they wrote? Okay, so you need to show me that.
That's right here. That's
But I
right.
teach that as a strategy to the kids. I'm like, do you notice what I do when I come and look at your work? I sit down, I read it out loud to you, and then I say,
But that's even been one of our proofreading
I know.
strategies, which I've talked to my kids
Yeah.
about,
How
was
do you-
before you even give it to
I
your
know.
friend, read it out loud. Because as we all know, we've obviously gone through university and we, our own proofreading, what we have in our head versus what when you read it, then you catch it, you can catch those things. But I'm thinking for some of those kids.
Yeah.
they
So
can
what do you press?
So now, piggybacking off of, we have read write on it. You can highlight it and it can read it, so if you want, I could.
Like, I wonder if that would,
Well, just wait one second, let's just
Help?
take out.
but. Oh, okay, well, on whatever program that is.
So if I highlight it, now you were saying, if I take out this comma, right here.
Yeah, and like, does it catch things
And
or?
if I take out that comma, remind me to correct this back, so. And take out this period, and now if I highlight my paragraph,
It had started as a beautiful summer day in the mountains of Alberta. Susie, a teacher from Medicine Hat, was hiking with her dog, a German Shepherd named Tracker.
So it does pause.
After they had stopped for lunch at a gurgling creek, dark rumbling clouds charged and rolled down from the mountain peaks, bringing a vicious rainstorm with it. Suddenly, Susie and Tracker needed to get to
So that would
safety,
help
either in
some.
the mountains or by getting out of the mountains.
But you really
As
have
the
to
thunder
listen.
rolled, Tracker whined
yeah, they
and
may
his
still
whole
not
body began to
notice the
shake,
difference.
uncertain of where to
Cause they
go to
may
escape
read
the
that way
storm.
too, right, without pausing.
Susie gripped his leash and they started to jog down the trail, slipping and sliding on the slimy and stony trail. Chaotically, the trees became denser, shaking and swirling, bending and bowing, and Susie could no longer tell which way to go. Bark. Tracker surged to the left, towing Susie like a skier behind a motorboat, stopping only when he reached the door of a snug cabin to wait out the storm. Susie had learned a lot of important lessons about being prepared and hiking with a reliable buddy in the mountains. Assessment. Acronym FAIR.
so, Liz,
I'm wondering if it's like really spelled really horrifically, right? Or they just have no clue what the word is.
Yeah, or if you have a small I
Mm-hmm.
instead of a capital.
this was bad.
It had started as a beautiful summer day in the mountains of Alberta.
Okay.
It had started as a beautiful summer day in the mountains of Alberta. Susie, a teacher from Medicine Hat, was hiking.
Yeah, like it
That
might
would help.
catch a few
That would
more,
help.
but
So as part of the proofreading step, is actually have them go through
Yes,
and actually listen to their work
Yes.
once.
it's a good idea.
Yeah.
but that still doesn't eliminate the fact that some are just not going to care. And that's kind of where you're stuck, right? Is
Well,
we can give you all these skills, but then how do you make them care about it?
I mean, that's, I guess if we look at that intrinsic piece, like that self-motivation, some kids have it, other kids don't.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe that might help also, because the majority of the kids, if they were being that, there was that assessment piece in the middle. Okay, it's like, what is that? You know, if we went and maybe broke it down so we didn't get all 4 phases and then I'm assessing,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's to even show that growth, the parents could be as step 1, this is what you got. Now, of course, the goal is to improve from here to here, and we should be able to see that difference. Like definitely when I've read through them, a majority of the kids, their writing did get better, but maybe not to what how much better I thought it should get to.
And I think it's important too to remember that for it to get better, it needs to get better like spontaneously. Like, so when you're doing your weekly, what do you need to know, or whatever you call them,
Yeah.
they should be able to, whatever you're assessing, they should be able to do it that day there, right? Like that's where the assessment should be from, not just from the one they got to do over and over 5 times.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so-
transfer skills.
And I think it's also individual too. I mean, I'm at a different part in the process, but I have one little guy who I don't think will ever get to proficient and may not by the end
No.
of the year. And you look at it, but he's made a huge, just going back to read, he's handed his work right away. I'm done. I just want to be done. I'm like, go back and read it. and it's taken, you know, almost years, but he's improved so much. Is it anywhere? It's probably still beginning. But it's, for him, it's moved all the way like 3 levels, like it's huge, and we've only done the first step. Like it's just, he would have never ever gone back and looked at his work again. And he hasn't, he's handed something in to me and I'd say, well, do you notice something missing? Yeah, I'm okay with it, right? And he just doesn't want to, so.
Did you find at all that as kids were getting feedback, that they wanted to change their story
Yes.
quite significantly?
I had some rewrite it,
Yeah.
totally,
Yeah.
start over.
Yeah, and some of my, that I would say more of my my higher academic kids were more in tune to that part, that they really changed from where they were to, like the one student, Toby, he had outright just said, I completely rewrote, and went through that whole process. So it was, I can see that. I also think what Melanie, what you just mentioned reminds me kind of, sometimes as we're not, yes, I know we're marking for outcomes, so then I'm thinking of it as maybe for the very first one that just kind of just came to my head, all this is language, the rules of language. So maybe that's all this one is being assessed on for our report card kind of thing, is that the rules of language. Then the next phase, if we're adding now in the descriptive piece, right? You know, then we can be getting, you know, then that's a different one. So then it's obviously still the rules of language are important for the next phase, but then also now here's the next part, and maybe that's where that rubric piece has to come in, is that specific, exactly what we're marking each one for. But then I guess ultimately, back to what my original thinking, what you were saying is this one boy is his growth, like what is proficient for him versus another student, I don't think always has to be exactly the same. We always have to then remember what is the outcome that we're trying, did they meet the outcome? 2, but what is that outcome? Like how do you, like what is actually meeting it? Like that's always that, trying to get rid of the subjective piece, but also, you know, making sure it's that whole fence thing, right? Are you over the fence or are you still on the side of the fence because it's not there? So anyway, that's where.
I like the 2 checklists are just very descriptive. Like it just leaves
right
it out,
there.
right?
Yes.
You know, there's a check mark for alliteration and for ambiguity. It's just not checklist figurative language. Like it's very, very specific.
And I guess that's what we were, when we sat down as a group, and the whole thing was just like where we were finding our deficiencies within the students' writings, and then how can we obviously try to improve student writing through feedback, and then how do we do that? And even like when we look at this final protocol, like all of a sudden this one gets quite extensive. Like we're doing the setting in red, we're talking about the character in orange, we're in the problem in yellow, the motivation in green, 3 things, you know, 3 things about the character and due to the problem, the solution, and then the message or the purpose in purple. Like,
Well, coming from an achievement test perspective in grade 6, these are exactly what they're looking for. So content, organization, vocabulary, sentence starters, and conventions. So it would be interesting to compare that to the rubric that they use on the achievement test and kind of to go through.
the next level, right?
Yeah.
And I know for grade 4, sentence starters are actually an outcome.
Oh, okay.
So that, but although we did mention it, because
Yeah.
it does start to come into the next level of grade 5. So those are the things like we're kind of like, yes, we know it needs to be like, so why not talk about it, but maybe without necessarily being assessing it, but identify that piece. So. Yeah.
What are you looking for specifically? What were you hoping to come out of?
I guess more, like always is the assessment of the rubric of how and what I'm going to market to, but I think I've already kind of started that process by breaking it down into the chunks. and assessing each chunk before we go to the next chunk, because then that might be the motivational piece for some, that I can do better if I
If I take more time, if I look at the